There's a new way to stay connected and know what's happening with Market to Market when you subscribe to Market Insider. One email and a lot of information awaits you. Go to markettomarket.org and subscribe to Market Insider. Details. It's all in the details for many trying to make sense of Trump policies right now. There's been lots of talk and push in, we might get a deal here, we have a deal here, but it's the details that have been kind of holding back some of the next steps, specifically in the pork industry. We're going to talk with the president of the board of directors of the National Pork Producers Council, and that's Duane Stateler. He is from Macomb, Ohio. He has a seat at many meetings where they are trying to figure out what's next. How do we find out what exactly is going to impact us on Prop 12? What's going to happen with labor? What's going to happen with trade? But the first discussion is about what came out of the MAHA report about making America healthy. What is being done and what is being classified one of the core products of this industry. And it's a big hurdle to climb for pork producers across the United States. We'll talk about that with Duane Stateler from Ohio right now, but we start with where he had a conversation with the head of the USDA, and it was at the Iowa State Fair. I'm Paul Yeager. This is the M2M podcast. New episodes come out each and every Tuesday. Now, let's get to our discussion with Duane. Duane, did you get a second pass to come to Iowa? I mean, you already did the World Pork Expo, and then you actually came to the Iowa State Fair. What's with that?
Well, I was out to the Iowa State Fair to see my good friend Pat McMonagle, and then we were there to have a meeting with Secretary Rollins.
I think Pat's friends with everybody. He certainly knows a lot of people in the industry. So you did have a conversation with the secretary. I guess we could just jump straight in then. What's your words to the Secretary of Agriculture right now?
Well, our words to the Secretary of Agriculture is we've got, concerns on Prop 12, and then we're also got concerns on the labor, and then we're just got a few concerns about some of the things in MAHA. Just wanting some actual answers rather than some, copies of drafts that might be intended for use or not intended for use. Just what is going to be the examples that we're going to, guidelines that we're going to go by.
And you'd like to see the details because then you can plan. Are you of that mindset?
Yes, we need the details. We've got two big concerns. The details is in the classifications of processed, ultra processed, and whatever. They seem to leave out the processed step and they're putting everything into ultra processed. And I just have a problem with that myself, and so does the industry, that when you're talking about ultra processed, I don't consider sausage, ground pork that's had some salt and pepper added to it to be sold as ultra processed. But when you only have the one classification, they're either talking about, they're just talking about ultra processed. That's where it could fall into. Well, is it or isn't it? There's no clarification on it. I mean, that's a real problem if it is, because then that takes out, not only does that take out just, plain sausage, but that takes out, then you're talking, the hot dogs, bratwurst, go right on down the line. And that will be a problem for us if that is all considered an ultra processed.
And this is specifically you are talking about in the MAHA report. That's where the processed, ultra processed part is.
Yeah, because there's really never been a definition, Paul, of anything. There's one that was sort of floated out there from Brazil. You have processed, you have your regular meat, you have your processed, you have your ultra processed, then you have a super ultra processed. And it's just sort of a thing that people have went by. There's no real definition. And that's what we're trying to get to, is what's the definition? Because, protein, especially dense protein like pork, that really shouldn't be thrown into an ultra processed if you're just adding some salt and pepper to it and calling it sausage.
It sounds pretty simple, but I'm guessing from what you're telling me, it's not been. And is there going to have to be changes in definition, changes in product? I mean, give me a couple of these hypotheticals of what you're talking through.
Yeah, we supplied, a definition, trying to get it from, because no one really has done that. So Our staff, along with dietitians across everywhere, they put together a plan and we turned it in, but we see nothing in the drafts that have come out to where did they listen? Is there anything with it? Because it's just a pretty bland statement, on the ultra process. Well, have you done anything about defining it? And we don't even know. There's a story in New York, or there was a story here today that don't pay attention to any of those two drafts because anything leaked you shouldn't trust. So where are we? Is that the true? Is the August 4th and the August 11th, versions that are out there? Are there really anything to them or not?
Do you know what the room is and where you can be in it to help in that conversation?
Well, we were invited in just the same as what the crop people were. Everybody was invited in to the White House there some time ago. We expressed those concerns. We have turned in, we were asked for more information. So our staff put together, some ideas on, coming up with the process, what is processed, what is ultra processed, and let's try to protect, dense protein, that is good protein. But we haven't heard back. We'll hear everything on August the 12th. Well, here we are, the 18th, 19th, and we're still, we've seen a couple of drafts that have come out, but they're pretty vague, a little bit more detail than what was in the first one. But, in the second part, according to the classification of the meat, is also on what you're using for scientific information. They're disregarding everything that we've always done. Of course, the pork board is separate from us as, national pork producers. That's the checkoff side. Well, and that's run by producers and it's producer money. But they've always used that producer money to get third parties, Iowa State, Ohio State, Purdue, whoever they could get to run research to check out the antibiotics and to check out, feed additives that we use, and how's our corn and our soybean, how does that soybean meal from a Roundup Ready bean, does it have any effect on our feed, or will it have any effect on our feed? Well, this Robert Kennedy Jr., he sort of likes the approach of, not going with that type of information because he thinks it's bought and paid for. Well, yeah, it was bought and paid for, but it was bought with producer money and decided by producers, what we wanted to try to find out, rather than they're looking at, I believe what they call risk-based information. And basically that's one or two people that have got an opinion on this is probably bad for you. And maybe they've got one research paper that backs it up, but it hasn't been done by, a group of people trying to really get into, looking at all areas. So those are the two concerns that we've had from the very beginning with this, Paul.
And Duane, I'm guessing when you ascended to president, you've got to be in that vice chair or vice president role. Was this even something that you were concerned about at that point when 2-3 years ago when you started up the leadership chain?
No, had no idea that this would come. It's just, will tell us, I would be the first one to, you've probably known the history. I would not be the first one that has had little second thoughts of Robert Kennedy Jr. after some of the comments he's made about pork producers in the past and pigs in the past. There was some concern there, but, I've always known President Trump to be able to sort through things, and I haven't seen him do too many things wrong. I mean, in his decision making when it comes to final decision, so it's a wait and see, but yet on the same token, we're not seeing what the actual process is going to be yet. And I don't know whether there'll be much time for us to speak after, the thing comes down. But believe me, we will speak to protect the industry.
You were probably thinking the majority of your term was going to be spent on Prop 12.
And it has been. My first year on the board, we made the decision to go, to go to the Supreme Court. I mean, and the whole plan was we're going to, go to California. We're going to lose. We're going to go to the Ninth Circuit. Hopefully we're going to lose So we get to the Supreme Court, and we knew before we ever made that decision as a board, Paul, that we had producers that at that point in time, they were all upset that we didn't do enough to try to stop this. Well, we didn't have $25 million to throw at that campaign. And if we'd have threw 25, they'd have come back with 35. We don't have the deep pockets that they did.
And you would have probably heard from membership of why are you spending $25 to $35 million
Right.
to chase something. So, I mean, if you go back to the money that you were referring to just a few minutes ago.
Yeah. And that's just, so it was going to probably be cheaper to try to stop it, in the court. And of course, we made it to the Supreme Court. And I think in reality, I think the Supreme Court got it right. I think that it should be legislated. The Commerce Clause just tried for them to pick on this. I think it was right for legislature to try to find, how are we going to settle this, because it's been vague. We're not the first case that's went with the Commerce Clause. There's been several others. But, it was all jumbled up. So we got that opinion. And we knew when we went down that avenue, Paul, that we were going to have producers that were upset with us, not getting it stopped in California. But some of those same producers were going to be willing to spend money to try to chase, because there was 13 to 14% of our domestic pork goes to that state. So we were going to have it. And that's what they wanted with this. The activists wanted to divide the producers. And they did, because we've got those now that have went to Prop 12, which is fine, because they're, even with what we do on stopping this, of carrying on to the other states, if people in California want to have Prop 12 type meat, those producers should be getting a premium for that. But we cannot have a patchwork of this, because we saw from the very beginning that a patchwork, when you go to where my times used to be consistent on delivering hogs to the packer, we loaded every day, from 6 to 8 p.m. in the evening. Well, now, because they've got to have this slot for Prop 12, we find ourselves loading out hogs anywhere from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., because they've got to fit the time slot. Well, now they're having to have a time slot so they can separate these pigs at the packer. Now, the packer takes and cuts that meat and sends it out to a retail place or a distribution center. Now the distribution center has an aisle that is Prop 12 and an aisle that is non-Prop 12, taking up twice the amount of space, twice as many SKUs to run through the computer system. What has that resulted in? Anywhere from a 20 to 40% increase in Prop 12 pork to California. Who does that hurt? It hurts the consumer. And what have they done? Yes, they've divided the industry a little bit, because, and I have nothing against those that were chasing the premium, for the Prop 12, because we have people there that need something to eat. But we've got to try to stand firm, because we can't have a patchwork of this. So, both GTs and the Henson bill to save our bacon, it does nothing to do to strip the right of the California people to, have their Prop 12, but it stops this from being a patchwork that there will be no more of this across the country.
Do you get the sense that that bill, the bacon bill that you're referring to, has a better chance of passing than getting some of the language into a farm bill in a larger package?
I will take either way we can get it across the line, Paul. I think there's a chance for one or the other. I don't know whether I can't be hard on GT Thompson, because he said we're going to get this done in reconciliation. And a lot of people didn't think that was going to happen, as far as, what we did get out of the farm bill. And we got everything we asked for in the farm bill for our herd health and, everything to protect the industry. And so kudos to him. And he is still, he is adamant. I talked with him just 2 weeks ago that we are going to get a 2.0 or skinny farm bill across the line. And if he does that, we're in. If we don't get that, if Henson would get something passed through the House, either one of those two could maybe get attached to something at the end of the year that would get us there. So we've got people talking. I know Pat Hord was down, and he had he was at a hearing that GT had on Prop 12 here a couple of weeks ago. And, there were some people that I received some phone calls on people that were upset with what came from the representative from Minnesota, when she made her opening remarks that, she said, there's some pluses and there minuses. And she listed some pluses to Prop 12 and she listed some negatives to Prop 12. And, she didn't want to, come out. Well, she's never listed the negatives Prop 12 publicly before. And I thought that was a win. I told people, I said, you have to remember, she is speaking, Representative Craig is speaking on behalf of the Democratic Party. She's the ranking member in that. She has to sort of, have a little bit of a tone. But I said a year ago, you would have never heard her say there was anything about Prop 12 that was negative. So we're gaining that ground because they see with the price of pork, they see with everything is that, we're getting traction. So I think we can get it across if we just find an avenue to get it out.
Well, that's actually a good point. Do you feel that you have a better opportunity with the Democrats in the House and in the Senate to make progress, to get them convinced of your viewpoints and what you need? Or do you feel like you're fighting within the Republican Party that's not all on board?
No, we're very good I think in the Republican Party, in the House side. And I think we can get bipartisan coming out of committee from GT's committee because we did it before. I mean, stop and think. We've had two presidents. We've had both President Biden and President Trump that have made public statements on this is bad for the country. We can't have this throughout. We've had Secretary Vilsack and we've had Secretary Rollins. Both make statements. So it's as bipartisan as it can get, from leadership. So that's something that we can grasp hold of. The Senate.
Because traditionally, Duane, the farm bills have been bipartisan efforts, especially in committees. And I asked Secretary Nag of Iowa this last week. It just doesn't seem to be the same. The Food Coalition and the Nutrition Coalition haven't been able to find that common ground, and I'm guessing that's kind of where something's going to have to happen in order to help you on this issue of Prop 12.
Right, that's what's going to have to happen. And I think we've got a tougher lift in the Senate because of the 60 votes. Mm-hmm. I think we've got a couple, of Democrats that can get us there, but I don't know if we can get there on the other issue. With some of them, we still need a few more.
Well, let's talk about the price of pork because, again, I'll reference my conversation with Secretary Nag. We talked about livestock prices, specifically beef. Beef has been on this huge rocket ship for a while. Has pork been benefiting or not benefiting from that run-up in higher beef prices right now?
We have seen a benefit. The numbers are starting to show that our ground pork is picking up. And that has been a real win for us because of the price point. And it's one of those things that I think a lot of people have never turned to ground pork before. Just plain old ground pork, just like ground beef. No salt and pepper added to it. I know we had class reunion here, and I had a pre-class reunion thing out here, and I had some brisket, and I had some loin, and I had what people thought were hamburgers. And they said, "How did you get this flavor in this hamburger?" And I said, "Because that's the real hamburger." I said, "You just ate a pork burger." And they said, "Oh my gosh, I never had that before. And that tasted, it was wonderful." And I said, "That's all I eat is the ground pork. We don't cook the hamburgers anymore. And the flavor's there." And I've been watching the Tyson has now moved into the ground pork has been in our local Walmart. And I watched, it used to stay there and it was enough there to where when you started coming to the end of the date, where you'd see packages on there, save 30%, if you buy this today. Well, it's not there anymore for those because the doggone case is empty. They're not keeping it up. And I'm hearing that from others that are watching it too. And we're seeing that in our SKUs coming from the pork board that yes, the pork is moving better.
Is it moving well domestically versus internationally, specifically as we talk trade?
I think we're picking up domestically. Trade is, a real issue for us. All the trade deals are, not exactly defined yet, and they're still getting wrote. Uh, we, you know, we're on top of that. I think where there's going to be some openings, but thank goodness China has gotten another, 80 days to go now, on that because our problem with our export system is a lot of the places we export to are taking things that we as Americans don't eat. Uh, the offal, the white offal is it,
Hmm.
and that basically is where the profit for the producer is at. Because if we're not able to get rid of that, that's where the margin is of what we get to keep. And if we don't get rid of that, it's just a waste product here. And packers, rather than getting anything for it, are going to pay to get rid of it.
Therefore, the packer margin changes again, and we already know
Yes.
about the beef packer margin. The pork packer margin
Yes.
is always a discussion. Do you? I guess it's almost back, Duane, to the very first thing we talked about: margins. Are you or details in these plans? How long can you hold out for details on some of these trade deals that will help pork producers across the U.S.?
Well, a little bit of a history lesson, Paul, is normally when you did the trade deals the old fashioned way, that took up to 2 years before you did it. This is on a fast track. Now, they said they will never get 90 deals in 90 days, and that's proven true. But trying to get this stuff down, there's two problems with what we're trying to do. It's a lot of information that they have to get put forth in these trade deals. I mean, you're talking not only our products, but everybody else's products. I mean, automobiles, tools, you name it, you're going with. And the other problem of it is this is on a piece of paper, just like an executive order. You can see just as the phase one in Trump's first administration, China followed that until President Trump wasn't there anymore. When he left and they never completed the rest of the phase one to even get to phase two in China. It had just sat there. Now that was a trade deal like what we're working with all these countries now. It wasn't officially done by legislative action. And then we have a few people, a few Republicans on the Hill that think that maybe we shouldn't be part of the WTO anymore. Well, hold back, boys, because if we're not part of the WTO, and if someone just comes in and reverses all these executive orders that this president has wrote for these trade deals, then we're going to revert back to our old trade deals that we've had. And if we're not a member of the WTO, we won't have any reciprocal action to go back to try to get us to that part. If we're not a member of the WTO, we'll have, our old legislative things will not be of existence. So yes, we do still need to be a member of that so that if something happens with these trade deals, we still preserve everything that has been legislatively passed and these agreements with countries in the past that would still have some teeth to them.
It's been a hard slog, and I've talked to people who've been through those negotiations, and they say yes, 45 weeks we've done these things, or 2 years, like you were saying, and it just can't be done because, frankly, Duane, it's the top line that some people want. It's those fine details. When you talked about the off products from the pig, and if those aren't mentioned, that's a huge deal for you, but it might not be a huge deal for someone else. So I'm guessing that's a little bit of frustration that I'm hearing come from you.
Well, it's not only that, but it's the non-tariff barriers or non-trade barriers. Those are the biggest sticking point. You know, you know, what do you do? What's this drug do? We just don't want this because you have this drug used in the U.S. We're not going to take any meat from you. That has been a problem with the EU for years. I mean, I sort of, I hate to pick on the beef people, but I sort of laughed at the EU when they made their agreement. They got their first agreement out before we ever got anything in. That okay, we're going to buy 13 million metric ton of U.S. beef, but you're going to have to buy 13 million metric ton of our European beef. which was a trade 1-for-1. And oh, by the way, you have to still meet all the non-tariff barriers. Well, if they've got X number of drugs on there, that rules out an awful lot of the beef. That just opens up a small part of your market that's going to be able to take advantage of that. And I thought, and we were asked if we were willing to do that. And I said, no. If we can't get every producer the opportunity to sell his pork to the European Union, we don't want a deal like that. That's, it's either all or none. I still feel as though anything that comes out of this country with the USDA stamp of approval on it, bar none, tops anything anyplace else. We have the best processing. We have the best science. We have the best inspections of meats, here in the United States compared to anywhere. And I would hold that up against anyone, just like our corn is better than corn grown in Brazil, beans, because of the protein contents. So I think that should be good enough.
As long as, Duane, you don't start saying that Illinois corn is better than Ohio or Iowa or Minnesota, then I think, the fighting words and the gloves will come off. Let's close with this, if we could. Labor. What's the labor situation? We've had farms that have had, and packing plants that have had labor removed from this country. Where are we standing? What's the NPPC's thoughts right now on what has come down with labor?
Well, as you know, you're always short of time when you speak to people, and there's normally one thing that you don't get a chance to ask. And I wanted a definition of what President Trump said a couple weeks ago of what is touchback. I think you probably heard that was mentioned, and it sort of raised some airs, and then you haven't heard much about it. But we in Ohio have had several producers that have had some that had come in during this Biden administration. They went back. They got their time because they weren't here. They came in through the Obama administration, matter of fact, to go back. And they were going to go first, and then they were going to come back, and they would let some other people go, and they would keep preserving the farm, the work on the farm. And then we could maybe get by with one or two of you being gone, and everybody else pick up the weight. Well, they've done that, but how do they get back? They can't get back to let someone else take that $1,000 ticket to go down and come back the way it is, because there's nothing in place for the ones that left to come back. And the sad part of it is the people that have got a job that are working here like it. And by the way, they're probably sending 50 to 60% of that money back to the rest of their family in another country that's making them better off, than what they are. But we need the labor, because in rural America, I don't care whether you're in Ohio, Indiana, Iowa, in rural America, we do not have the extra people out here to fill the jobs and the needs that we have in the barns. It's just a plain, simple fact. When you're at a sow farm, it's different from what it is from me being a contract grower and just on the, on the finish side. But if you're managing a sow farm, if you're managing a dairy, if you're managing a cow-calf herd, you need more labor. That's the bottom line. There's
round-the-clock labor, depending on the size of the operation.
Yes. There's just not enough family members to go around in that kind of a situation. So you need to depend on labor, to do it. And the labor's not here in rural America.
All right, Duane, your final months of your presidency here, what are you trying to accomplish?
Well, I just hope we get some definitions to some of the problems we've discussed here. So, once we know what the definition is, then maybe you can try to work at solving the problem, and hopefully everybody is open, to solving. I know everybody right now thinks because it was abroad as far as on the crop side that, maybe with what they've heard that maybe Roundup and, atrazine aren't as much of a target as what it was, 4 months ago. But until we see the actual details, we just don't know. And that's what we got to look for. And I'm hoping we get some answers so we can try to get some producers around to where we can try to keep, the industry going forward and supplying people with good, nutritious pork.
Duane, I thank you for your answers to my questions today. And by the way, when you were at the Iowa State Fair, did you eat? What'd you have?
Well, I was at the pork tent, of course.
Did you
I had
try?
that pork chop. I had the pork chop on the stick. I did not try the Hawaiian
Oh, you
because I'm
didn't.
sort of not. I'm not into the sugar and the
Yeah.
and stuff with that I look to. So I did not try, but it looked really good. There were a lot of people trying it.
Well, Pat's group there came up with, and I love their coleslaw. Always have loved the coleslaw at the pork producers. That's always been great. And then when they put it together with the line was always busy. So was the pork belly on a stick. That one also floats around. Actually, you know what? I don't see that one often because people eat that in about one bite and it's gone.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
All right, Duane, thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Duane, for your conversation, and we will talk to you next time, next Tuesday, when new episodes come out in both audio and video form. Thanks for following along. Share this with a friend so you too can have something to talk about. We'll see you next time.